In the forgotten corner of Millbrook County stands Westridge Elementary, a sprawling brick building reclaimed by nature after 15 silent years. For Hannah Reeves, 6 months pregnant and starting over with nothing but determination, the condemned school was more than a desperate purchase. It was her last chance. The auction price a mere $28,000. The potential a home where her child could grow up safe. But as Hannah peels away decades of neglect, strange discoveries emerge from behind crumbling walls, children's drawings with disturbing imagery, locked rooms absent from building plans, whispered warnings from reluctant townspeople who cross the street when they see her coming. What happened in those classrooms that made an entire community abandon a perfectly good school? What secrets lie waiting in the shadows for Hannah and her unborn child? Hannah traced her fingers over the stack of medical bills spread across the motel bed, the bold red final notice stamps, like wounds on each envelope. 6 months pregnant and completely alone. The eviction notice from her apartment sat on top, a cruel reminder that teaching kindergarten didn't prepare you for medical complications that ate through savings and sick days. "This is temporary," she whispered, hand resting on her swollen belly. The baby kicked in response, their private Morse code of reassurance. The Millbrook County auction flyer caught her eye again. Property John 37, Westridge Elementary School, starting bid, $25,000. It seemed impossible, an entire school building for less than a year's rent in the city. Condemned, yes. Abandoned for 15 years, yes. But the pictures showed solid brick walls, intact roof, 20 classrooms, gymnasium, cafeteria, space, possibility. Dr. Eleanor Richards had called her crazy when Hannah mentioned it during yesterday's checkup. "Hannah, honey, you need stability right now, not a renovation project," Eleanor had said, adjusting her glasses while reviewing ultrasound images. "Besides, nobody from Millbrook would touch that place. There's a reason it's been empty all these years." But Eleanor was the only person in this small town who'd shown Hannah any kindness since she'd arrived 3 weeks ago, seeking cheaper housing and medical care. The doctor wouldn't understand the desperation of having nowhere else to go. The next morning, Hannah stood among a sparse crowd at the county auction, mostly developers eyeing the farmland lots, a few curiosity seekers. When properties RFM 37 came up, the auctioneer's enthusiasm noticeably dimmed. Westridge Elementary School, 28,000 square feet on 6 acres, significant repairs needed. Starting bid, $25,000. Silence fell, no hands raised. The auctioneer cleared his throat. "Do I hear 20? 15? Hannah raised her paddle, heart pounding. 15,000. Whispers rippled through the crowd. An elderly man in overalls leaned toward his neighbor. Someone should warn her. "Going once for 15,000. The auctioneer called, relief evident in his voice. "Twice, 28, called a voice from the back. A man in an expensive suit, phone pressed to his ear. Hannah's heart sank. Then, inexplicably, her hand raised again. 29. The man in the suit shook his head at whoever was on the phone. "Client says let it go," he muttered to the auctioneer. "Sold to the young lady for $29,000. Later, as the realtor unlocked the heavy front doors, Hannah noticed his hands trembling slightly. "You're getting quite a deal," he said, voice flat. "Just sign here, and it's all yours." "Sold ours is, of course." "Of course," Hannah echoed, signing the papers balanced on her belly. "I was a kindergarten teacher. I know schools." The realtor avoided her eyes. "Not this one, ma'am." The smell hit her first as they entered. Musty air, mildew, and something else. Something chemical beneath the decay. Late afternoon sunlight filtered through dirt-streaked windows, illuminating dust particles dancing in the air, and the massive entry hall, with its faded school mascot, a lighthouse painted on the floor. "Why did it close?" Hannah asked, her voice echoing in the empty space. "Budget cuts," the realtor answered too quickly. District consolidation. Then why wasn't it sold until now? Market conditions. He handed her the keys, already backing toward the door. Congratulations on your purchase. I hope it's everything you're looking for. That night, Hannah inflated her air mattress in the former teacher's lounge, the only room small enough to feel secure. She'd brought essentials: battery-powered lantern, sleeping bag, bottled water, sandwich fixings. The electricity would be turned on tomorrow, water the day after. As darkness settled, strange creaks and moans echoed through the building. Just old pipes, settling concrete. Nothing more. Hannah wrapped her arms around her belly. "We're home, little one," she whispered. "It's not much yet, but it will be. I promise." Somewhere down the dark hallway, something that sounded like a classroom door clicked shut. Morning light filtered through grimy windows as Hannah swept the principal's office. 3 days of clearing debris had transformed the space from hazardous to merely shabby. The desk remained solid beneath decades of dust, its drawers yielding paper clips, dried-out markers, and administrative detritus from another era. Hannah paused at a dusty frame that had fallen behind the filing cabinet. Wiping it clean revealed a class photo, dated 27 children with matching gap-toothed smiles, arranged in 3 neat rows, all except one, a child in the back row, whose face had been deliberately scratched out with something sharp. "Odd," Hannah murmured, setting the photo on the desk. The scratches seemed angry, violent even. She turned it over, finding neat handwriting, listing names corresponding to each position. The defaced child was labeled simply Robert M. A sharp knock startled her. A man stood in the doorway, mid-40s, weathered face, tool belt slung low on faded jeans. "Mike Lawson," he said, not offering his hand. "Town sent me to check the wiring before they turn the power on. Safety hazard and all that." Hannah doubted the town cared about her safety, but she nodded. "Hannah Reeves, thank you for coming." Mike's gaze swept the office, lingering on the class photo. Something crossed his face: recognition, then discomfort. "Good luck with this place," he said, turning toward the electrical panel in the hall. "Gonna take more than luck to make it livable." Hannah followed. "I was hoping to hire someone for the essential repairs. The gymnasium roof, plumbing, that sort of thing." Mike tested the panel, frowning. "Most folks around here don't take jobs at Westridge." "Why not?" He shrugged. "Bad memories, maybe. Schools closing hits communities hard, but it's been 15 years. Surely, look, I'll do the safety essentials. Wiring, water, structural hazards. That's it." His voice softened slightly. "No place for a baby, this." Hannah's hand went instinctively to her belly. "It will be." Later at Millbrook Hardware, Hannah pushed a cart loaded with cleaning supplies, spackle and paint. The store fell silent as she entered, conversations resuming in hushed tones. The gray-haired cashier's eyes widened. When Hannah mentioned West, "Oh, honey, you're the one who bought the old school. Bless your heart." She leaned closer. "My sister's boy went there last year. It was open. Never been the same since." "What happened?" Hannah asked. The woman glanced around and whispered, "That place should have stayed closed. Some things aren't meant to be disturbed." She squeezed Hannah's hand. "Be careful there, especially after dark." Back at the school, Hannah found Mike finishing up. "Electricity's on, water too, though the pressure's weak. I capped some leaking pipes in the east wing, but the whole system needs replacing eventually." "Thank you," Hannah said. "Would you consider—" "Can't help further." Mike gathered his tools quickly. "Tried Jensen Construction in Riverdale, 20 miles east, but they might take it on." Hannah noticed him staring at the class photo she'd propped on the desk. "Did you know him?" she asked. "Robert M., the scratched-out boy." Mike's face hardened. "This town has buried its ghosts for good reason, Miss Reeves. I suggest you let them rest." He paused at the door. "If you're smart, you'll sell this place and find somewhere else to raise your child." After he left, Hannah continued organizing. The building felt different with electricity, less abandoned, but somehow more watchful. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, illuminating corners that darkness had mercifully hidden. Water stains mapping continents on ceiling tiles, cracked linoleum curling away from walls, faded construction paper still clinging to bulletin boards. In what had been the front office, Hannah discovered an old filing cabinet that actually opened. Inside, dusty folders contained school records, maintenance logs, supply orders, staff evaluations. She sat cross-legged on the floor, sorting through history. A manila envelope labeled School Events 1985-1999 yielded a treasure. Photographs documenting assemblies, field days, holiday concerts. Hannah spread them across the floor, watching Westridge's past unfold. Children lined up for field day ribbons, a Christmas pageant with cardboard star and bedsheet costumes. Awards ceremonies with proud parents clutching cameras. In every photo from the final years, Hannah noticed something curious. The children's smiles seemed strange. The teachers stood slightly apart from their students, tension evident in their postures. Even the school mascot, once prominently displayed in every shot, had been removed from the backdrop in later events. What changed? Hannah wondered, carefully returning the photos to their envelope. What turned this ordinary elementary school into a place people crossed the street to avoid? As if in answer, the lights flickered once, twice, then stabilized. From somewhere deep in the building's east wing came a sound that might have been a door closing or opening. The teacher's lounge transformed remarkably after a week of Hannah's attention. Fresh paint-covered water stains, a salvaged sofa replaced the air mattress, and curtains sewn from fabric store remnants softened harsh windows. The microwave and mini-fridge from her old apartment hummed contentedly in the corner that served as kitchen. Not exactly a nursery, Hannah said, surveying her work, but it'll do until the gymnasium renovation. She'd chosen the teacher's lounge strategically, close to functioning bathrooms, small enough to heat efficiently, and centrally located to monitor the building's increasingly curious noises. Last night's unexplained footsteps had kept her awake until dawn. Mike Lawson arrived precisely at 9, toolbox in hand. Despite his reluctance, he'd agreed to help with basic renovations, strictly business, strictly daylight hours. Found something you should see, he said, leading her to a storage closet near the library. Been sealed up. Inside, behind shelves of moldering textbooks, stood a dusty filing cabinet. Mike pried it away from the wall, revealing a red leather-bound book, wedged as if hastily hidden. Journal, maybe, he said, not touching it. Thought you'd want to know. Hannah retrieved the book, a small journal with a tiny brass lock. No key in sight. Thank you, she said. Any idea whose it might be? Mike shrugged, already moving toward the gymnasium. Before my time. Later, Hannah examined the journal, testing paper clips against the simple lock. The binding was expensive, the pages gilt-edged. A teacher's private thoughts, perhaps. The school's final year had been 2008, yet the journal's vintage style suggested something older. A harsh knock interrupted her lock-picking attempt. A tall man in a sheriff's uniform stood at the office door, broad shoulders nearly filling the frame. Ms. Reeves, Sheriff Thomas Parker. His tone made it more accusation than introduction. Doing a safety check on the property. Hannah rose awkwardly, pregnancy making her movements ungainly. I wasn't aware the sheriff's department conducted building inspections. Special circumstances, Parker replied, eyes scanning the room. Abandoned properties, potential hazards. It's not abandoned anymore. Parker's smile didn't reach his eyes. So I see. Mind if I look around? Without waiting for permission, he moved into the hallway. Hannah followed, irritation building as Parker methodically checked doorways, windows, even pausing to photograph certain classrooms with his phone. Is there something specific you're concerned about, Sheriff? Parker stopped before room 19, trying the locked door. Just doing my job, ma'am. This building has history, so I keep hearing, though nobody will tell me what kind. Parker turned, studying her. Where'd you come from, Miss Reeves? Chicago. I taught kindergarten at Lakeside Elementary. And you came to Millbrook? Because, Hannah bristled. Lower cost of living. Medical bills. It's not exactly a mystery. Parker made another note. Well, place seems secure enough. Though I'd reconsider staying here alone in your condition. He handed her a card. Call if you notice anything unusual. After Parker left, Hannah returned to the office, finding the red journal exactly where she'd left it. Beneath it lay a paperclip she'd bent into a lockpick. She was certain she'd left it on top. That evening, Hannah organized her makeshift bedroom while a reheated casserole, Dr. Richard's latest housewarming offering, bubbled in the microwave. The baby kicked vigorously, apparently enjoying the doctor's cooking more than takeout. Easy there, Hannah murmured. Save some room for dessert. A metallic clang echoed from the hallway. Hannah froze, listening. The building creaked constantly, but that sound had been distinctive, like a locker door slamming. She peered into the corridor. Classroom 109, the room Parker had tried, stood at the far end. Its door, definitely locked earlier, now stood ajar. Hello? Hannah called, heart pounding. Mike? Is that you? Only silence answered. Then, impossibly, the door swung fully open. Hannah retreated to the lounge, fumbling for her phone. Who would she call? The sheriff, who clearly suspected her of something. The handyman, who could barely conceal his unease. Dr. Richards, who'd already expressed concerns about Hannah's isolated living situation. The microwave dinged, making her jump. Hannah took a deep breath, gathering courage. This was her home now. She wouldn't be frightened away by old pipes and drafty doors. Later, lying in bed, Hannah felt the baby shift restlessly. The movement seemed different tonight. Not the usual stretching and hiccups, but rhythmic, almost deliberate, pressing outward, then pausing, then pressing again, always toward the east wing of the building. What is it, little one? She whispered into the darkness. What do you feel that I can't? In the corner, the red journal sat on her makeshift nightstand. In the dim glow of her phone screen, Hannah could swear the lock had changed position since she'd last touched it. Hannah wheeled the janitor's cart down the east wing corridor, determined to reclaim at least one classroom. After 2 weeks of living in the teacher's lounge, she craved progress, something to prove this wasn't all a horrible mistake. Room 105 seemed promising. Intact windows, minimal water damage, southern exposure for natural light. Perfect for the nursery she'd eventually create. As Hannah unlocked the door, the baby delivered a series of sharp kicks against her ribs. I know, she murmured. You're helping me decide. The classroom appeared standard. Bulletin boards, alphabet frieze, cubbies along the back wall. Hannah started with the built-in cabinets, pulling out moldy construction paper and dried-up markers. Behind the last cabinet, wedged in the narrow gap between furniture and wall, she discovered a folder, yellow, water-stained, labeled simply Art, Special Projects. Hannah settled onto a dusty student chair, folder balanced on her belly. Inside were children's drawings, dated from the final school year. Nothing unusual at first, the typical houses, families, and impossibly blue skies of elementary art. Then the images changed. A crayon drawing showed stick figures cowering in a classroom, while a tall black shape loomed in the doorway. Another depicted children, holding hands around what looked like a circle of salt, faces twisted in fear. A third showed the school with dark clouds hovering above it. Clouds with eyes. Hannah's skin prickled. Children's imaginations ran wild. Of course, but these drawings shared a disturbing consistency. Same black figure, same classroom setting, same expressions of terror. The final drawing stopped her cold. Crude but recognizable Westridge Elementary, half the building engulfed in black scribbles. In the foreground, a stick figure labeled Mrs. Wilson stood with her arms outstretched, mouth a horrified O. Above her, block letters proclaimed, "Ed wants in." The baby suddenly thrashed violently, a rolling wave visible across Hannah's stretched skin. She gasped, clutching her belly as the movement peaked, then subsided. "It's okay," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was reassuring the baby or herself. Hannah carefully returned the drawings to the folder. Just children processing fears through art. Nothing more. As she stood, movement caught her eye, a shadow passing the frosted glass window in the classroom door. "Hello?" she called. No response. The classroom felt suddenly colder. Hannah moved toward the door, but stopped at the chalkboard. Something wasn't right. The green surface, which had been dusty but blank when she entered, now displayed a single word in crude, childish writing. "Leave." Hannah backed away, heart hammering. "Mike, is that you?" The chalk writing remained, stark white against green. Hannah grabbed her cleaning cloth, wiping frantically until every trace disappeared. Her hand trembled as she gathered her supplies, eager to escape the suddenly oppressive room. Back in the relative safety of the teacher's lounge, Hannah called Dr. Richards. The folder of drawings sat on her makeshift coffee table, a tangible reminder she hadn't imagined everything. "Eleanor, it's Hannah. Something strange happened today." She hesitated, how to explain without sounding completely unhinged. "Hannah, perfect timing. I was about to call you," Eleanor's warm voice replied. "How are you feeling? Any more Braxton Hicks contractions?" "No, I'm fine, but excellent. Listen, I'm concerned about your isolation out there. Why don't you come into town for lunch tomorrow? My treat." Hannah sighed. "That would be nice. Eleanor, have you ever heard stories about Westridge? About why it closed?" A pause. "The usual small-town politics, I imagine. Budget constraints. Nothing unusual? The children, maybe." Another, longer pause. "Hannah, pregnancy can be an emotionally vulnerable time. Living alone in that big empty building, it's natural to feel unsettled. I found disturbing drawings, children's artwork from the school's final year. Kids draw all kinds of things." Eleanor said carefully, "Their imaginations, and there was writing on a chalkboard that I didn't put there." A sigh. "Hannah, is the renovation getting overwhelming? You know my guest room is always available. I'm not imagining things." Hannah insisted. "Of course not. Let's talk tomorrow, okay? I'm at 12:30 at Caroline's Diner." After hanging up, Hannah stared at the folder. She wasn't crazy. Something had written on that chalkboard. At Millbrook's only diner the next day, Hannah immediately sensed something wrong. Conversations halted as she entered. The hostess hesitated before approaching. "I'm sorry," she said, not meeting Hannah's eyes. We're actually not serving today. Kitchen problems." Hannah glanced around at tables full of customers eating. "But you should try Riverdale." The hostess backed away. "We can't help you here." As Hannah turned to leave, bewildered, an elderly woman at the counter met her eyes. The woman's gnarled hand trembled as she beckoned Hannah closer. "They're afraid," she whispered. "We all are. That place you're living in, Westridge, it was never just a school." She pressed something into Hannah's palm. "My name's Irene Miller. I was the school nurse. When you're ready to know the truth, come find me." Hannah opened her hand to find a tarnished brass key. The Millbrook Public Library smelled of dust and lemon polish, its wooden shelves sagging under decades of rarely disturbed books. Hannah settled at a microfiche machine in the back corner, where the librarian, a thin woman with suspicious eyes, had reluctantly directed her. "Local newspapers," the woman had said. "We only digitized back to 2010. Anything earlier is on these." She gestured to metal drawers containing film reels of the Millbrook Gazette. "Though I'm not sure what you're hoping to find." Hannah wasn't sure either, but Irene Miller's cryptic warning echoed in her mind. For 3 hours she scrolled through local history, searching for anything related to Westridge Elementary. Finally, in January 2008, a headline caught her eye: Westridge Elementary to close for renovation. The brief article mentioned structural concerns requiring immediate attention and temporary relocation of students to neighboring districts. A follow-up piece 2 weeks later announced the closure would extend through the academic year, citing extensive remediation needed. Then nothing. No updates on renovations, no announcements of reopening. Westridge Elementary simply vanished from the news, as if the town collectively agreed to forget it existed. Hannah moved to more recent microfilm, finding only a small notice in 2015. County lists abandoned properties for tax auction. Westridge appeared 8th on a list of 15 derelict buildings. Find what you're looking for. The librarian materialized beside her, making Hannah jump. Not really. Hannah gestured at the screen. There's nothing about why the school closed permanent, just vague mentions of renovations that never happened. The librarian glanced toward the front desk, then lowered her voice. Some things don't make it into the papers. What do you mean? Those last months, children started seeing things, talking about things. She straightened a stack of papers needlessly. My nephew was in 4th grade. Started having nightmares, refusing to go to certain classrooms. He wasn't the only one. What did they see? Ask Irene Miller. She was there. The librarian retreated as an elderly patron approached. That's all I know, she whispered. At her afternoon checkup, Hannah debated mentioning the strange occurrences to Dr. Richards. The ultrasound machine hummed as Eleanor studied the grainy image. Blood pressure's a bit elevated, Eleanor noted, frowning. Are you getting enough rest? Hannah watched her baby's profile on the monitor. It's been a stressful week. Eleanor made a note in the chart. Hannah, I'm concerned. Living alone in that massive building, all the renovation work, it's not ideal for your 3rd trimester. I'm managing. Hannah hesitated. Eleanor, do you know Irene Miller? She was the nurse at Westridge. Eleanor's hands stilled momentarily. Irene? Yes, of course. Small town. Why do you ask? I met her yesterday. She seemed concerned about me living at the school. Well, that's understandable. The place is hardly move-in ready. It's more than that. People react strangely when I mention Westridge. The librarian said children were seeing things before it closed. Eleanor sighed, removing her gloves. Hannah, small towns run on gossip. Whatever happened at Westridge, budget cuts, low enrollment, the usual politics of rural education, it's been exaggerated through years of retelling. Then why won't anyone give me a straight answer? Why did the diner refuse to serve me? People here are set in their ways, suspicious of outsiders. Eleanor patted Hannah's hand. Don't take it personally. Back at Westridge, Hannah found Mike's truck in the parking lot, but no sign of the handyman inside. She called his name, voice echoing through empty corridors. Finally, she spotted his toolbox abandoned outside the gymnasium, tools scattered as if dropped in a hurry. Mike? She pushed open the gymnasium doors. Empty. A note had been hastily taped to his toolbox. Emergency came up, can't continue work. Bill in mail. Hannah felt a chill despite the afternoon warmth. First the diner, now Mike. The town was closing ranks, pulling away from her one by one. That night, Hannah dreamed of children. Dozens of them filled the hallways of Westridge, whispering urgently among themselves. They wore old-fashioned clothes, 1980s jeans and t-shirts, and their faces held a strange intensity beyond their years. In the dream, Hannah tried to speak to them, but they looked through her, as if she were the ghost. All except one boy who stood apart from the others. He approached, his face serious, eyes ancient in his young face. It knows about your baby, he whispered. It's waiting for both of you. Hannah woke with a strangled cry, sheets soaked with sweat. The baby thrashed wildly, her belly rippling with movement. Outside her window, dawn painted the sky in watercolor streaks of pink and gold. But Hannah felt no comfort in the light. Something had changed. The school felt different, aware, anticipating, as if it had been sleeping all this time and was finally fully awake. Hannah unfolded the yellowed building plans across the principal's desk, comparing them to her hand-drawn map of the school's layout. Something didn't match. The official blueprint showed a straightforward design, two main corridors intersecting in the central hall, classrooms branching off symmetrically. But Hannah's explorations had revealed peculiarities, storage closets that seemed too deep, hallways that bent subtly when they should run straight. She'd been working methodically through the building, marking every door, window, and stairwell on her own crude floor plan, documenting the reality against the architect's vision. The east wing particularly troubled her. It contained two more doors than the blueprints indicated should exist. In the bottom drawer of the principal's desk, Hannah had discovered a leather binder containing maintenance logs, dating back to 1985, flipping through decades of routine repairs, leaking pipes, broken windows, temperamental heating systems. She noticed a curious pattern. Repairs to Room 107 appeared with unusual frequency, but no Room 107 existed on any building plan. A knock on the office door made her jump. A young man stood there, early 20s, lanky frame draped in an oversized cardigan, despite the June heat. "Ms. Reeves?" His voice cracked slightly. "I'm Lucas Bennett. From the town archives." Hannah vaguely recalled leaving a message about researching Westridge's history. "Come in," she said, clearing space among her papers. "I didn't expect anyone to actually respond." Lucas shifted awkwardly. "Most wouldn't, but I've been digitizing the municipal archives. And well," he gestured to her pregnant belly. "My sister's expecting too. Seemed wrong to ignore you." Hannah smiled, her first genuine smile in days. "Thank you. I'm trying to understand this place, but I keep hitting walls, literally and figuratively." Lucas glanced at the blueprints. "What specifically are you looking for? Anything about why the school closed? Or about Room 107, which appears in these maintenance logs, but isn't on any floor plan?" Lucas stiffened. 107, you know it?" He hesitated. "I attended Westridge, last class before it closed." Hannah's heart quickened. "You were a student here?" "Lucas, what happened? Why did the school really close?" "It's complicated." Lucas studied the maintenance logs. "These are interesting, though. Mind if I make copies?" Hannah sensed his deflection but didn't push. "Take what you need. I'm just trying to make sense of things. People react strangely when I mention living here, but nobody will explain why." "It was a difficult time for the town," Lucas said carefully. "Children were having experiences. Adults dismissed them as imagination or attention-seeking." "What kind of experiences?" Lucas's fingers traced the blueprint absently. "Cold spots, voices, items moving. Some kids talked about a presence in certain classrooms. Watching them." The hair on Hannah's arms rose. "Did you experience these things?" "I should document these records properly," he said, avoiding the question. "The archives should have construction amendments, renovation records. I'll check what else I can find." As Lucas gathered the maintenance logs, Hannah felt the baby shift uncomfortably. Recently, the movements had developed a pattern, agitation in certain parts of the building, complete stillness in others. "Lucas," she said quietly, "do you think this building is haunted?" He looked up, eyes troubled. "I think whatever happened here was more complicated than ghosts, Ms. Reeves." He hesitated at the door. "Be careful in the east wing. Some doors should stay closed." After he left, Hannah felt the silence settle heavily. She'd been living in the school for nearly a month now, and instead of feeling more at home, she felt increasingly like an intruder. Certain rooms seemed to reject her presence. Lights flickering when she entered, doors that had been locked mysteriously opening, cold spots that defied the summer heat. Dr. Richards had called that morning, voice tight with concern. "Hannah, I can't in good conscience support you living alone in your condition. If you won't consider my guest room, at least let me arrange a home health check." "I'm not alone," Hannah had replied without thinking. What do you mean? Hannah had no answer that wouldn't sound delusional. Now, studying the blueprints, Hannah focused on the East Wing's discrepancies. If room 107 existed, it would logically be located between 106 and 108. A section that appeared as solid wall on the plans but somehow contained more physical space than it should. That evening, Hannah walked the east corridor slowly, running her hand along the wall where 5-7 should be. The paint felt different here, newer perhaps. As she pressed against a section that seemed to give slightly, the lights flickered dramatically. The baby went completely still. "What is it?" Hannah whispered, pressing her palm against her belly. "What do you feel?" For the first time, Hannah sensed she wasn't asking the baby, but something else, something that had been watching her since she arrived. Something that knew she was looking for room. Behind her, a classroom door slammed shut with such force that the windows rattled. "It's just a small gathering," Hannah insisted, into the phone, arranging grocery bags on her makeshift kitchen counter. "Dinner for you, Lucas from the archives, and me. That's hardly a wild party." Dr. Richards sighed on the other end. "Hannah, I'm worried about you. Your blood pressure was elevated at your last 2 checkups. You're clearly not sleeping well, and now you're alone in that massive building with no reliable help since Mike Lawson quit." "Which is precisely why I need to show you I'm managing fine," Hannah countered, unpacking ingredients for the pasta dish she'd planned. "Besides, I've made progress. The teacher's lounge is completely livable. I've cleared out 3 classrooms, and Lucas is helping research the building's history. It feels like home now." The last part was a lie. Despite her efforts, Westridge felt less like home and more like contested territory with each passing day. The unexplained incidents had increased, doors opening and closing, lights functioning in unpredictable patterns, the persistent sensation of being watched. Last night she'd awakened to find every cabinet door in the teacher's lounge standing open, though she distinctly remembered closing them before bed. "Fine," Eleanor relented. 6 o'clock, but I'm bringing dessert and prenatal vitamins, and I'm doing a full check of your living conditions." "Yes, doctor," Hannah said, smiling despite herself. After hanging up, Hannah continued preparations, grateful for the approaching evening of normal human interaction. The library book she'd been reading, A History of Millbrook County, lay open beside her groceries. She'd been combing it for references to Westridge, finding only brief mentions of the school's construction in 1983 as part of an educational expansion program. While arranging fresh flowers in a salvaged vase, Hannah noticed the school felt different today, quieter, observant, as if it were holding its breath. At precisely 5:30, a knock startled her. Lucas stood in the doorway, 30 minutes early and visibly nervous. "Sorry," he said, fidgeting with his messenger bag. "I wanted to show you something before Dr. Richards arrives." "Come in," Hannah gestured to the lounge's seating area. "You found something in the archives?" Lucas hesitated before entering, eyes darting to corners, as if checking for unwelcome presences. "Not exactly, but I've been thinking about what you said about room 107. He lowered his voice. "I remember it," Hannah stilled. "The room not on the blueprints? You've been inside?" "Not exactly." Lucas withdrew a tattered notebook. "In 5th grade, they pulled certain students from regular classes, called it enrichment. We'd get escorted to different rooms, but the door to 107 was always, well, sometimes it wasn't there at all." "That's impossible." "I know how it sounds." Lucas flipped through his notebook. "But other kids saw it too. We started documenting, comparing notes, trying to make sense of what was happening." Hannah studied Lucas's face, finding no trace of deception. "What do you think was happening?" "I'm not sure, but after my notebook was confiscated, I started hiding special items around the school. Things that felt protective, including this." Lucas reached into his pocket, extracting an oddly shaped brass key. "I found it in the library, hidden in a hollowed-out book of fairy tales." Hannah's breath caught. "I found a locked journal behind a filing cabinet. The lock looks similar, A sharp knock interrupted them. Hannah tucked the key into her pocket as Eleanor entered, bearing a bakery box and an expression of professional concern. "Hannah, Lucas," Eleanor nodded to the young man. "How lovely to see you involved in community outreach." Something in her tone made Hannah uneasy. Dinner progressed with forced normality, Eleanor probing Hannah's physical and emotional state between bites of pasta. Lucas remained quiet until conversation turned to Westridge's history. The official closure was for renovations, Lucas said, but everyone knew that was false. Too many strange incidents, too many frightened children. Eleanor's fork paused midway to her mouth. "Children have active imaginations." "It wasn't imagination," Lucas insisted. "The tests they ran on us." The front door slammed open, cutting him off. Sheriff Parker stood framed in the entrance, hand resting meaningfully on his holster. "Evening, folks," Parker said, voice deceptively casual. "Hope I'm not interrupting. Just doing my regular property checks." Hannah rose awkwardly. "Sheriff, this is private property now." "Of course, ma'am, just being thorough." Parker's gaze lingered on Lucas. "Bennett, didn't expect to see you here." Lucas paled. "Just helping Ms. Reeves with historical research." "That's so." Parker stepped closer. "Find anything interesting in those archives?" "Standard town records," Lucas muttered, not meeting Parker's eyes. A tense silence stretched until Eleanor broke it. "Thomas, since you're here, perhaps you'd like some coffee. Hannah has made a lovely dinner." The sheriff's demeanor shifted subtly at Eleanor's intervention. "Another time, perhaps." His eyes swept the room, pausing at Hannah's collection of Westridge documents spread across a side table. "My father was principal here during the final years. He had quite the collection of school memorabilia. Died shortly after the closure." "I'm sorry for your loss," Hannah said automatically. "Stress of the job," they said. Parker's tone hardened. "Funny how quickly people forget their promises once the crisis passes." He tipped his hat. "You folks enjoy your evening. Reeves, I'd advise caution about which doors you try opening in this place. Some were locked for good reason." After he departed, the atmosphere remained heavy. Eleanor quickly made excuses to leave, extracting a promise from Hannah to call if anything felt wrong. Left alone, Hannah and Lucas exchanged troubled glances. "The journal," Hannah said. "Let's see if your key fits." Morning sunlight slanted through the east corridor windows, casting long, distorted shadows across peeling linoleum. Hannah walked slowly, trailing her fingertips along the wall where room 107 should logically exist. After a sleepless night spent poring over the red journal, which remained stubbornly locked despite Lucas's key, she felt drawn back to this section of the building. The wall appeared solid, unbroken by doors or architectural features. Yet the maintenance logs mentioned room 107 repeatedly, flickering lights, temperature fluctuations, strange noises, reported by students and staff. Hannah paused, feeling a subtle change in the wall texture. Here the paint seemed newer, covering what might have been a seam. The baby shifted restlessly, pressing against her ribs as if trying to move away from the wall. "I feel it too," Hannah murmured. She continued down the corridor, noting how the shadows seemed to behave differently in this section, stretching and contracting independent of the sun's position. At the very end of the hallway stood a fire extinguisher cabinet that had always been there. But today, something about the quality of light made Hannah notice details previously overlooked. The cabinet wasn't perfectly flush with the wall. Behind it, almost imperceptible in the morning light, ran a thin sea. Heart quickening, Hannah moved the cabinet aside with effort, revealing the faint outline of what could be a door sealed, painted over, but unmistakably there. No handle, no hinges visible, just the ghost of an entrance long concealed. Lucas's key burned in her pocket. On impulse, Hannah pressed it against the wall where a lock might have been. Nothing happened, but the metal grew curiously warm against her fingers. Hannah stepped back, studying the hidden door from different angles. From most perspectives, it disappeared entirely into the wall. Only when the light hit just right did the outline emerge. She marked the spot with a pencil before returning to her makeshift apartment, mind racing with possibilities. That afternoon, she returned with tools, a flashlight to manipulate shadows, a stud finder to locate structural elements, and a small hammer to test for hollow spaces behind the wall. The door remained visible in the afternoon light, more defined now, as if encouraging her efforts. Hannah tapped gently along the seam, the hammer making a distinctly different sound when it hit the concealed door versus the solid wall. She worked methodically, mapping the door's dimensions, searching for any mechanism that might open it. As sunset approached, the corridor darkened gradually. Hannah was about to abandon her efforts when the last rays of sunlight struck the wall at a perfect angle, illuminating what appeared to be a small circular depression where a keyhole might be. With trembling fingers, Hannah inserted Lucas's key. It slid in smoothly, as if the wall had become liquid at its touch. She turned it, feeling resistance, then a distinct click. The outline of room 7 materialized fully, seams widening, paint cracking along borders that shouldn't exist. The door swung inward silently, revealing darkness beyond. Hannah hesitated at the threshold, every instinct warning against entering. The baby had gone completely still, a heavy weight pressing downward. Taking a deep breath, she stepped through. Unlike the rest of the school, room 7 showed no signs of abandonment or decay. It appeared to be a standard classroom frozen in time. Desks arranged in neat rows, educational posters adorning walls, a teacher's desk positioned prominently at the front. A clock on the wall read 3:15, though Hannah's watch showed 6. The air felt different, heavier, charged with something Hannah couldn't identify. Unlike the musty, neglected atmosphere of the rest of Westridge, room 7 smelled faintly antiseptic, like a doctor's office. On the teacher's desk sat a class roster, names neatly typed: Alan Bernstein, Jessica Collins, Michael Denton. Hannah recognized some surnames, children of current Millbrook residents, including Lucas Bennett halfway down the list. The room contained no windows, though soft, diffuse light emanated from somewhere Hannah couldn't identify. The chalkboard displayed a strange diagram, concentric circles with symbols between each ring. In the center, a crude drawing of what might be a lighthouse. Hannah moved toward the back of the classroom, where filing cabinets lined the wall. The drawers slid open effortlessly, revealing folders labeled with students' names. She selected Lucas's file, finding pages of evaluations with clinical language. Subject shows elevated response to stimulus. Telepathic receptivity scores above baseline, recommended for Phase 2 testing. A noise in the corridor startled her. Footsteps, light and quick, like children running. Hannah replaced the file and moved to the door, peering out into the empty hallway. The sound continued, accompanied now by whispers and suppressed giggles, though she saw nothing. When she turned back to the classroom, the atmosphere had changed. The lights dimmed momentarily, and Hannah could have sworn the desks had shifted position slightly. The baby remained unnaturally still. "Hello?" Hannah called softly. "Is someone here?" Only silence answered, but the quality of that silence felt intentional, as if something were deliberately withholding response, watching her reaction. Hannah backed toward the door, suddenly desperate to leave. As she stepped into the corridor, a child's laughter echoed clearly from inside room 107. The door swung shut behind her, the key turning in the lock on its own. "I thought you might find it eventually." Hannah whirled to find Irene Miller standing at the end of the hallway, her aged face grave in the dim light. "I felt it when you entered. We all did." Hannah's hands trembled as she poured tea for Irene Miller. The elderly woman sat primly on Hannah's salvaged sofa, her weathered fingers clutching a small photo album. "I wasn't just the school nurse," Irene said, watching Hannah settle awkwardly into an armchair. "I was the monitor for children with special sensitivities." "Sensitivities?" Hannah echoed. "That's what we called them officially." Irene opened the album, revealing Polaroid photographs of Westridge students from decades past. But they were more than sensitive. Some could perceive things others couldn't. Some knew things they shouldn't possibly know. Others could influence their environment. Hannah leaned forward to examine the photographs. At first glance, they showed ordinary school scenes. Children at desks, on playgrounds, in cafeteria lines. But looking closer, Hannah noticed anomalies. Strange light patterns surrounding certain children. Blurred areas where movement seemed captured mid-manifestation. Expressions of awareness beyond their years. "I don't understand," Hannah said. Irene pointed to a boy about 10 years old, his face serious beneath a mop of dark hair. Bobby Miller. No relation, though people assumed. He could predict events before they happened. Small things at first, fire drills, surprise quizzes. Then bigger things. She turned the page. Sarah Jennings? Objects moved when she was upset. Lights flickered. Doors opened. Children with psychic abilities. Hannah couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. "We didn't use those terms," Irene said sharply. Too sensational. "We called it heightened neurological sensitivity, HNS, for the official records." "We? Who exactly was monitoring these children?" Irene hesitated. It started as a small research initiative, tracking statistical anomalies in cognitive development. But when Westridge showed unusually high concentrations of children with these traits, the program expanded. A chill ran through Hannah as she recalled the clinical language in Lucas's file. Government involvement? A specialized division, very discreet. They provided funding for enrichment programs and specialized health monitoring. Irene's mouth twisted bitterly. "I was brought in as medical staff, but my real job was documenting manifestations and administering the testing protocols." Hannah placed a protective hand on her belly. "What kind of testing?" "Nothing harmful initially. Standardized assessments modified to measure extrasensory perception. Controlled environments to document telekinetic potential. Emotional response monitoring." Irene flipped to another photograph. Children seated in a circle, eyes closed, concentrations intense. But as results proved promising, the methods intensified. And room 107, the focal point. Something about that specific location amplified abilities. Children who showed minimal sensitivity elsewhere would demonstrate remarkable capabilities inside 107. Irene's voice lowered. It wasn't just the room. Something about Westridge itself seemed to catalyze these traits, like the building was a conduit for something larger. Hannah thought of the lighthouse symbol painted in the entry hall, replicated in the strange diagram on room 107's chalkboard. The school mascot, the lighthouse. It wasn't random, was it? Project Lighthouse, Irene confirmed. The program's code name, illuminating hidden potential, guiding special children to safe harbor. She laughed hollowlessly. Such noble language for what eventually became exploitation. The baby kicked suddenly, a sharp movement that made Hannah gasp. Irene's eyes narrowed. "How often does your baby respond to this building? Specific locations? Conversations like this one?" Hannah shifted uncomfortably. "Often, how did you know?" "In 30 years of monitoring, I developed a sense for the indicators." Irene reached toward Hannah's belly, stopping just short of contact. "May I?" Reluctantly, Hannah nodded. Irene's palm hovered above her swollen abdomen, not quite touching. "Active," the older woman murmured. "Responsive. Your child is exhibiting in utero what we typically wouldn't detect until age 3 or 4. Her eyes met Hannah's. "Have you experienced unusual dreams since moving here? Intuitions? Moments of knowing things you shouldn't know?" "That's just pregnancy," Hannah protested. "Hormones, maternal instinct. Perhaps," Irene allowed. "Or perhaps Westridge recognized something in you, just as it's recognizing something in your unborn child. The building has always been selective about who it welcomes. You're talking about the school, as if it's sentient, not the physical structure," Irene corrected. "What accumulated within it over years of concentrated psychic energy. What the children inadvertently created through their collective abilities." She closed the photo album. "What eventually became strong enough to manifest independently. The dark figure in the children's drawings," Hannah whispered. "The presence they sensed," Irene nodded gravely. a psychic impression given form, a composite entity built from fear, pain, and extraordinary power. The children created it, then became terrified of their creation. That's why the school closed. The official program was already shutting down. Too many ethical questions, too many parents growing suspicious. But the entity remained, growing stronger as the children's fear fed it. Irene rose stiffly. When you found room 107, you awakened what had been dormant for 15 years. It knows you're here now. It knows about your baby. What does it want? Irene moved toward the door. That's what terrifies me, my dear. After all this time, I think it wants a child of its own. Lucas arrived before dawn, face pale in the bluish glow of early morning. Hannah let him in silently, leading the way through darkened corridors toward room 107. I didn't sleep after your call, Lucas said, voice low as if afraid of being overheard. I've spent 15 years trying to forget this place, and now I'm sorry, Hannah replied. But after what Irene told me, I need to know everything. And you're the only former student who'll speak to me. They reached the East Wing corridor, stopping before the section of wall concealing room 107. In the dim light, the door was barely visible, a shadow within shadows. It changes, Lucas whispered. Sometimes there, sometimes not. We never knew what determined its appearance. Hannah retrieved the brass key from her pocket. Irene mentioned audio recordings. Documented evidence of what happened here. Lucas nodded grimly. They recorded everything. Our sessions, our episodes, as they called them. For research. The key slid into the invisible lock, turning smoothly. The outline of room 107 materialized, edges solidifying as the door swung inward. Unlike Hannah's previous visit, the classroom now appeared dimly lit by a single desk lamp, casting long shadows across empty desks. Lucas hesitated at the threshold, trembling visibly. I haven't been in here since 5th grade. You don't have to. I do. He stepped forward, shoulders squared against memory. They separated us into groups based on ability type. I was classified as receptive-projective. I could sometimes hear others' thoughts, and occasionally they could hear mine. The classroom looked subtly different from Hannah's last visit. Desks rearranged, different posters on the walls, as if the room itself were adapting to Lucas's memories of it. There, Lucas pointed to a storage cabinet at the back. Behind the resource materials, they kept the recording equipment there. Hannah approached cautiously, the baby shifting uncomfortably within her. The cabinet looked ordinary, metal shelving stocked with textbooks and teaching supplies. But when she pressed against its side panel, it swung away, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside sat an old cassette player with dozens of labeled tapes stored in plastic cases. Bennett, L, Session 17. Group C interaction test. Collins, J, emotional stimulus response. Each tape meticulously dated. Each child reduced to data points, may I? Lucas's hand hovered over a tape labeled with his name. Hannah nodded, watching as he loaded it into the player. Static crackled. Then a clinical female voice emerged. Subject LB, age 10. Session 23. Receptivity test using controlled thought transmission. A different voice. Male and authoritative. Lucas, I'm going to project a sequence of numbers. Please repeat them as you receive them. Young Lucas, voice higher but recognizably his. I don't feel good today. My head hurts. The medication should help with that. Now focus, please. Receiving in 3, 2, 1. Silence. Then young Lucas again. 4, 7, 3, 9, 1. Excellent. Now colors. Red, blue, yellow, green, purple, black. A pause. Black wasn't in the sequence, Lucas. I know. It's what's behind you, watching. The recording continued, documenting increasingly distressed responses from young Lucas as he described a dark presence observing the session. The researchers' voices remained clinically detached, noting his apparent hallucination as a stress response to testing conditions. Lucas stopped the tape, hands shaking. They never believed us. Even when multiple children reported the same thing. Even when equipment malfunctioned and temperatures dropped whenever it appeared. Hannah selected another tape, labeled Room 107 Anomalous Recordings. This one captured what sounded like a standard testing session, interrupted by static, children's voices rising in alarm, then a strange modulating tone beneath the chaos, almost like words, but distorted beyond recognition. It learned to manipulate the recordings, Lucas explained. Eventually, the electronic equipment would fail completely when it was present. Hannah played portions of other tapes, building a chronology, early sessions documenting remarkable abilities in ordinary children, later recordings showing increasing anxiety among subjects. Final tapes capturing researchers' growing concern as phenomena occurred beyond their control. The baby kicked violently as one recording played a child's voice whispering, "It's getting stronger." "It wants out." The classroom door slammed shut. Hannah and Lucas spun toward the sound, finding Sheriff Parker silhouetted in the doorway, hand resting on his holster. "Breaking and entering," Parker said flatly. "Plus tampering with government property." "This isn't government property," Hannah countered. "I own this building." "The building, yes. The contents of this particular room remained classified." Parker stepped forward, surveying the exposed tapes. 15 years, and people still can't leave well enough alone. Lucas moved protectively toward Hannah. "She has a right to know what happened here, especially if it might affect her child." Parker's expression hardened. "You always were trouble, Bennett." "Still spreading stories." He gathered the cassettes methodically. "These are evidence in an ongoing investigation. I'm confiscating them." "Investigation into what?" Hannah demanded. "Child exploitation? Medical experimentation without consent?" "Into my father's death," Parker snapped. "Into why the man who ran this school for 20 years suddenly killed himself the day after it closed. Into why half the children who attended special classes here ended up with psychological problems." He pointed at Lucas. "Or turned into conspiracy theorists who can't function in normal society. Thomas?" Hannah tried a gentler approach. "I'm just trying to understand what I'm living with. What might affect my baby?" Something flickered in Parker's eyes. Doubt, perhaps, or buried decency. Then his radio crackled. "Sheriff's Department calling for response to a disturbance downtown. This room is sealed. Effective immediately," Parker ordered, backing toward the door with the tapes. "Anyone found in here will be arrested for interfering with an active investigation." After he left, Hannah and Lucas exchanged grim looks. "We need to find Lucas," Hannah said. "Today," Lucas nodded. "I'll try his apartment, but by afternoon." Lucas had disappeared, phone unanswered, apartment empty, as if he'd fled town entirely. 2 days after Lucas vanished, Hannah found herself in the darkened records room of Millbrook Town Hall, heart pounding as she worked a hairpin into the antiquated lock. Breaking and entering wasn't her style, but Lucas's disappearance and Sheriff Parker's confiscation of the tapes had pushed her past legal niceties. The lock clicked open. Hannah slipped inside, flashlight beam revealing metal filing cabinets lining the walls. She had perhaps an hour before the night janitor made his rounds. Parker had mentioned his father's death, coinciding with the school's closure. If Principal Parker had been involved with Project Lighthouse, perhaps he'd left records, something to explain what happened at Westridge. Hannah moved methodically through the cabinets, finding nothing under Westridge or education. The deceased resident's drawer yielded a thin file for Parker, William J., containing standard death certificate and obituary. Cause of death, suicide by hanging. A handwritten note in the margin caught her attention. Personal effects in storage cabinet C. Pending family retrieval. Cabinet C contained a sealed cardboard box labeled Parker W.J. Personal Effects. Inside, beneath folded clothes and framed photographs, Hannah found a leather-bound journal. The first entry, dated September 1985, detailed William Parker's excitement at being appointed Westridge's new principal. Later entries chronicled a school administrator's typical concerns: budget constraints, staff conflicts, curriculum adjustments. Then in 1992 the tone changed. Met with Dr. Harmon today regarding the statistical anomalies in our standardized testing. Apparently, Westridge students score significantly higher in pattern recognition and nonverbal reasoning than district averages. Dr. H suggested additional assessment protocols to identify special aptitudes. Funding would come through a private research foundation. Seems like a wonderful opportunity. Entries over subsequent years documented the program's evolution, special enrichment group showing remarkable progress. Parents pleased with the attention, though we've kept specific methodologies proprietary. Dr. H brings colleagues regularly now, observers who never introduce themselves properly. More equipment arriving weekly. Room 107 completely retrofitted with monitoring systems. Told staff it's for distance learning pilot program. Concerning incident with Sarah J. today. Emotional distress during testing triggered power fluctuation throughout East Wing. Dr. H ecstatic, but the child was terrified, beginning to question if we're pushing too hard. Hannah flipped ahead, noting the increasingly troubled tone. Parker had begun documenting children's complaints, headaches, nightmares, nosebleeds during sessions. Parents reporting behavioral changes at home. By 2007, his entries became openly critical of the program, confronted Dr. Harmon about medication protocols. Some children receiving daily supplements without specific parental consent. Ethical lines being crossed. Harmon dismissed concerns, reminded me of contract obligations and confidentiality agreements. Something happening in room 107 beyond their control. Children reporting a presence, a manifestation separate from any individual. Researchers initially skeptical but now documenting autonomous phenomena. Whatever they've awakened is feeding on these children's fear. The final entries were increasingly erratic. The handwriting deteriorating. They're shutting everything down. Too many incidents, too many questions. Harmon calls it temporary suspension of operations, but they're removing equipment, destroying records. The children know something they aren't telling us. It's still here. They think they can abandon the project, walk away, pretend nothing happened. But they've created something that can't be undone. I hear it at night, moving through the building, waiting. The last entry dated the day before William Parker's death. I've failed these children, failed this community. When I agreed to host the program, I believed we were nurturing special gifts. Instead, we exploited vulnerable minds, pushed them past natural barriers, created something that should not exist. Tomorrow I'll go public, show the evidence I've gathered. Let the consequences fall where they may. He never got the chance. The next day, William Parker was found hanging in his garage. A noise in the corridor startled Hannah. She quickly photographed key pages with her phone, then carefully returned the journal to its box. As she closed the cabinet, voices approached, the janitor speaking with someone else. Sheriff was just here, looking for records on his daddy, the janitor said. Told him they were still in storage. Hannah's stomach dropped. Parker had been here today. Was he coming back? She slipped behind a tall filing cabinet as the door opened, light spilling into the darkened room. Just need to empty the trash, the janitor said to his companion. Won't take a minute. Hannah held her breath, willing herself invisible as the janitor moved around the room. Finally, the light switched off. The door closed and voices receded down the hallway. She waited 5 agonizing minutes before creeping out, easing into the empty corridor. The exit sign glowed red at the hallway's end, promising escape. 3 steps toward freedom, a hand clamped onto her shoulder. Ms. Reeves, Sheriff Parker's voice was dangerously soft. Interesting place for a pregnant woman to be wandering after hours. Something's wrong with the baby, Hannah's voice echoed in Dr. Richards' private examination room, where the physician had hurriedly brought her after a late-night call. Hannah had escaped Sheriff Parker with a flimsy excuse about pregnancy brain and record-keeping confusion. But the encounter had triggered something physiological, sharp cramps, dizziness, and an alarming stillness from the normally active baby. Eleanor's face remained professional as she applied cold gel to Hannah's swollen abdomen. Let's take a look before jumping to conclusions. The ultrasound wand glided over Hannah's skin, projecting grainy images onto the monitor. Eleanor studied the screen with unusual intensity, her brow furrowing. Heartbeat is strong, she noted. No signs of distress. Then why has movement decreased so dramatically? And these headaches, they're getting worse. Eleanor adjusted the machine, focusing on the developing brain. She froze the image, staring at the screen with an expression Hannah couldn't quite read. Was it concern? Or something else, something like recognition? Eleanor? Hannah prompted. The brain development is progressing normally, Eleanor said carefully, though her eyes remained fixed on certain areas of the scan. Though there are some unusual activity patterns I'd like to monitor more closely. What kind of patterns? Eleanor switched off the machine, wiping the gel from Hannah's belly with practiced efficiency. Probably nothing concerning. Development varies widely between individuals. That's not an answer, Hannah said, struggling to sit up. You've been my doctor for months. Something's changed in how you're treating me, just like everyone else in this town when it comes to Westridge. Eleanor sighed, removing her glasses to rub the bridge of her nose. Hannah, I care deeply about your well-being, and your babies. That's why I've been pushing for you to move out of that school building. It's because of the school, isn't it? What happened there? What they did to those children? Eleanor's expression shuttered. I don't know what you've heard, but I found William Parker's journal. I know about Project Lighthouse, the experiments on children with psychic abilities. Hannah leaned forward. What I don't know is why my baby seems affected by whatever remains in that building, or why you're not surprised by what I'm telling you. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Eleanor rose, crossing to a filing cabinet secured with a combination lock. She returned with a folder, hesitating before placing it on the examination table. I was part of the medical team, she admitted quietly, monitoring physical effects of the testing protocols, ensuring the children remained healthy despite unusual neurological activity. Hannah stared at her, betrayal burning in her chest. You knew? All this time you knew what I'd bought, what I was living with, and you said nothing. I was trying to protect you, to persuade you to leave without revealing classified information. Eleanor opened the folder, revealing brain scans labeled with children's names and dates. The activity patterns in your baby's brain. I've seen them before, in the children with the strongest abilities. Hannah's hand went protectively to her belly. That's impossible. Those children were tested for years. My baby isn't even born. That's what concerns me. Eleanor shuffled through the scans, selecting one labeled Bennett L. Even Lucas, one of our most receptive subjects, didn't display these patterns until after extensive exposure to room 107. You're saying my unborn child shows signs of psychic ability? How? Eleanor hesitated. There's something you should see. She pulled a document from the back of the folder, a birth certificate, Hannah's birth certificate, listing Millbrook General Hospital as her birthplace. That's not possible, Hannah whispered. I was born in Chicago. You lived in Chicago most of your life, yes, but you were born here, Hannah, in 1989, during the early years of Project Lighthouse. Eleanor met her eyes directly. Your mother was a research assistant on the project. When she became pregnant, early tests suggested her fetus, you, might carry genetic markers associated with enhanced perception. The room seemed to tilt. I was part of the project. They experimented on me as a baby. Preliminary observations only. But when you were 6 months old, your mother became concerned about the project's direction. She resigned abruptly, left town with you, and apparently constructed a new history. Eleanor's voice softened. I didn't make the connection when you first arrived, the name change, the decades between, but when your baby's scans started showing familiar patterns. And you didn't think to tell me? Hannah's voice rose. That? I have some connection to the place I randomly purchased? Randomly? Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Hannah, you were drawn back to Millbrook of all places, to Westridge specifically. Despite no conscious memory, something pulled you here. Hannah's mind reeled, pieces clicking into terrible alignment, her inexplicable attraction to the abandoned school at auction, the familiar feeling when she first entered, the baby's unusual reactions to specific areas of the building. The entity Irene mentioned, Hannah said slowly, the psychic impression the children created, it recognized me, didn't it? It's been waiting for me to come back. Perhaps, Eleanor conceded, or perhaps your unborn child, already exhibiting unusual abilities, was drawn to a place where such abilities are somehow amplified. Why would my baby? Morning sunlight did little to warm Irene Miller's small living room, where Hannah sat wrapped in a borrowed afghan, hands cradling a mug of herbal tea. After the frightening episode at Dr. Richard's office, Hannah had fled, not to Westridge, but to the one person who had offered truth from the beginning. The contractions stopped? Irene asked, settling into a worn armchair opposite Hannah. Yes, once I was far enough from the clinic. Eleanor wanted to hospitalize me, but... Hannah shuddered. The way instruments flew across the room, the lights. It felt like something was trying to reach me through her equipment. Medical technology was always a catalyst, Irene said. Something about electrical fields and measuring devices seemed to strengthen the manifestations. Eleanor admitted she was part of Project Lighthouse, that I was born here in Millbrook, that my mother worked on the project. Hannah's voice broke slightly. My whole life is built on lies. Not lies. Protection. Irene reached beneath her chair, extracting a battered file folder with "Classified" stamped across its cover. I took these when I left the project. Insurance, in case anyone came looking for answers. Hannah accepted the folder with trembling hands. Project Lighthouse, Phase 2 Implementation, read the header on the first page. What followed were clinical descriptions of psychic amplification protocols, telepathic networking, and manifestation guidance. The government wanted weapons, Irene explained as Hannah scanned the documents. Children who could remotely gather intelligence, influence electrical systems, perhaps even impact human biology. But what they found at Westridge exceeded their parameters. Hannah paused on a page detailing collective manifestation phenomena, incidents where multiple children simultaneously reported or influenced the same environmental changes. They created something they couldn't control. The children did, Irene corrected. That was the revelation that eventually shuttered the program. The extraordinary abilities weren't individual, they were collective. When grouped together in room 107, these children formed a kind of psychic network, amplifying each other's capabilities. Eventually, that network developed its own consciousness. The entity in the children's drawings, Irene nodded. At first, it was just a shared hallucination, a dark figure observers couldn't see. Then, equipment began malfunctioning when it appeared. Temperature drops, unexplained sounds, finally physical effects, objects moving, doors opening and closing. The researchers were simultaneously terrified and elated. Hannah flipped through more pages, stopping at photographs of children with electrodes attached to their temples, their expressions vacant. This is horrific. They were just kids. By the time anyone recognized the ethical problems, it was too late. The entity had become self-sustaining, feeding on the children's fear and the researchers' excitement. When they tried to shut down the program, withdraw the children, that's when the worst incidents occurred. What happened? Irene's gaze turned inward, remembering. Mass manifestation. 17 children simultaneously experiencing the same vision. The dark figure standing in the school entryway, arms outstretched. Lights throughout the building exploding, doors slamming, locking researchers in rooms. 3 children hospitalized with identical symptoms, racing heart, respiratory distress, unexplained bruising in the shape of handprints on their arms. Hannah found a memo dated the day before William Parker's suicide, ordering immediate project termination and facility abandonment. A handwritten note in the margin read, "Cannot be contained, will not be controlled." They just Left it there, in the school, with whatever they created. They thought abandonment would starve it of energy. Without the children's fear and abilities to feed on, the manifestation would dissipate. Irene's mouth tightened. Clearly they were wrong. And my connection to all this? Eleanor said I was tested as an infant. Your mother, Catherine, was researching genetic markers that might predict psychic sensitivity. When tests on her own unborn child, you, showed the strongest indicators they'd ever recorded, she panicked, disappeared with you before they could include you in the formal program. Irene leaned forward. But what drew you back to Westridge after all these years? I had no idea, Hannah protested. Hannah, it was just a cheap property at auction. Of all the places you could have gone, you chose the town where you were born. Of all the buildings available, you chose the one that once housed Project Lighthouse. Irene's eyes were kind but direct. And now you carry a child, showing the same abilities that created the entity in the first place. You think it called me back, that it, somehow, influenced my decisions. I think your unborn child recognized its spiritual home, the place where its abilities would be strongest. Irene patted Hannah's hand. The entity needs a vessel, Hannah, a physical form to fully manifest in our world. For 15 years it's been waiting, growing stronger in isolation rather than weaker, and now you've brought it exactly what it needs. A child with extraordinary potential, already responsive to its presence. No, Hannah whispered, arms wrapping protectively around her belly. I won't let that happen. Then you need to understand what we're dealing with. Irene reached for another folder, this one labeled with a lighthouse symbol. This is everything I know about what was created in that school, and why Westridge should have remained abandoned forever. Rain pounded against Westridge's windows as Hannah approached her school for the first time in 3 days. She'd been staying at a motel in neighboring Riverdale, avoiding both the building and Eleanor's repeated calls. But she couldn't hide forever, not with her due date 6 weeks away and her money rapidly dwindling. As she unlocked the main entrance, something felt different. The school's familiar emptiness had changed, replaced by a sense of watchful anticipation. Hannah moved cautiously through the main hall, heading for the teacher's lounge to collect essential belongings before finding more permanent housing elsewhere. A metallic glint caught her eye, something attached to the doorframe of the former principal's office. Hannah froze, examining the small device now visible in the lightning flash from outside. A motion sensor newly installed. As her eyes adjusted to the dim light, she noticed more. Tiny cameras positioned at key intersections, monitoring equipment that definitely hadn't been there when she left. Someone was watching the school. Watching her. Hannah retreated to a blind spot between cameras, pulling out her phone to call Irene. No signal. She tried moving to different locations. Still nothing, despite full bars showing on her screen. The storm shouldn't be affecting reception this severely. A vehicle pulled into the parking lot, headlights sweeping across the entrance hall. Hannah ducked into a classroom, peering through rain-streaked windows as an unmarked van parked beside her car. 2 men in civilian clothes emerged, carrying equipment cases. Hannah crept back through side corridors toward the east wing. If someone had breached the school's security, she needed to check room 107, the focal point of Westridge's mysteries, and if Irene was right, the place most likely to draw whoever was monitoring the building. The east corridor appeared unchanged at first, until Hannah noticed a black cable running along the baseboard, leading to the invisible doorway of room 107. As she approached, the air grew noticeably colder. The wall where 107's entrance should be remained solid, refusing to reveal itself. Footsteps echoed from the main hallway. Hannah quickly entered the nearest classroom, leaving the door slightly ajar. Through the crack, she watched as Sheriff Parker and Dr. Richards walked past, deep in conversation. Clear activity spikes in the east wing, Eleanor was saying, consulting a tablet. Similar to the patterns from '08, but stronger. The energy signatures are unmistakable, and you're certain she doesn't suspect?" Parker asked. "Hannah believes I'm concerned about her pregnancy. She has no idea we've been monitoring the reemergence." Hannah's breath caught. Eleanor wasn't just a former project member. She was actively involved in whatever was happening now. "We need to move quickly," Parker continued as they paused at the junction leading to room 107. "If your readings are correct, we have days, not weeks, before full manifestation." "Without the girl as a focal point, we have other options," Eleanor interrupted. "Her child shows even stronger indicators than she did. If we could—" "We're not discussing this here," Parker cut her off, glancing around nervously. "The place has ears." They moved out of hearing range, turning toward room 107. Hannah remained frozen, mind racing. They were monitoring the entity's reemergence. They needed a focal point, and her unborn child was somehow key to their plans. After they disappeared around the corner, Hannah slipped from the classroom, intending to escape before they discovered her presence. As she neared the main entrance, voices approached from outside, more people arriving. She diverted to a side exit, only to find it chained from the outside. Trapped, Hannah retreated to the gymnasium, the one area she'd fully renovated, with multiple exits and hiding places among stored equipment. As she crossed the vast space, the lights suddenly blazed on. Hannah ducked behind bleachers as the gym doors opened. A team of people entered, wheeling equipment on carts. Computers, monitoring devices, what looked like medical equipment. Among them walked a distinguished older man Hannah didn't recognize, clearly in charge as he directed the others to various positions. "Perimeter sensors operational," reported a technician. "We've established the containment field around room 107 and are registering significant energy fluctuations." "And our subject?" asked the older man. Eleanor stepped forward. "Hannah Reeves is still in Riverdale according to our surveillance. Her pregnancy is progressing rapidly, accelerated development consistent with heightened embryonic sensitivity to external stimuli." "Excellent." The man surveyed the gymnasium. "This will be our fallback position if the entity breaches primary containment. Prepare the holding area according to Protocol Theta." Hannah watched in horror as they began arranging equipment in a circular pattern, creating what appeared to be some kind of elaborate trap. In the center, they placed what could only be described as a containment pod, a transparent chamber large enough to hold a person, or a pregnant woman. They weren't trying to destroy the entity. They were trying to capture it, using her and her baby as bait. Hannah's phone vibrated silently in her pocket. A text message had somehow penetrated the communication blackout. "From an unknown number, stay hidden. They're everywhere. Meet me at the boiler room." El Lucas was alive, and somewhere in the school, the baby kicked vigorously as Hannah crept along the gymnasium's perimeter toward the maintenance hallway. For once, she welcomed the movement. Proof that whatever these people planned, they hadn't succeeded yet. The ancient boiler room huddled in Westridge's basement like a metal beast, pipes snaking across the ceiling in rusted arteries. Hannah descended cautiously, each step on the metal staircase echoing despite her care. At the bottom, darkness swallowed her flashlight beam. "Lucas?" she whispered, heart hammering, a shadow detached from deeper darkness. "Here." Lucas looked thinner than when she'd last seen him, dark circles beneath his eyes. "They've been looking for me since Parker caught us in 107. I've been hiding in the maintenance tunnels." "What's happening?" "Who are these people?" "The original Project Lighthouse never truly shut down. They just went dormant, waiting." Lucas led her deeper into the boiler room, where he'd created a small hideout behind massive water tanks. A laptop connected to spliced cables gave him access to the building's newly installed security feeds. "After what we discovered, they accelerated their timeline. They're trying to stabilize the manifestation before it fully emerges." "Stabilize?" "They're planning to contain it somehow? Not destroy it, control it. Use it." Lucas pulled up schematics on his computer. The project's original goal was weaponization of psychic phenomena. They never abandoned that mission, just their methods. When the entity became too powerful for the children to control, they shut everything down. hoping it would dissipate without psychic energy to sustain it. But it didn't. It adapted. Found ways to feed on ambient energy, emotional residue, maybe even the collective memory of what happened here. It's been gathering strength for 15 years. Lucas's voice dropped. Then you arrived, genetically sensitive and carrying a child with even stronger potential. The perfect catalyst. A shiver ran through Hannah. Eleanor and Parker are part of this? And Sheriff Parker's father, did he really kill himself? William Parker threatened exposure when he realized what they'd created. His death was never investigated properly. Lucas checked another monitor showing the gymnasium. They're establishing a containment field, technology they've refined since the original project failed. They believe they can trap the entity at its moment of full manifestation, harness its abilities, using my baby as a conduit. Hannah's hands tightened protectively around her belly. That's their plan. The child's developing mind, already connected to the entity, would provide the perfect bridge between worlds. Lucas met her eyes. We need to leave, now, before the storm gets worse, and while they're focused on room 107. The storm. Hannah glanced toward a small basement window where rain lashed violently. What does weather have to do with this? Electrical storms have always amplified manifestation events. The original researchers documented it extensively. Lucas began gathering his few possessions. They're expecting something significant tonight. That's why they've accelerated preparations. Hannah's phone vibrated, another text somehow breaking through the communication blackout. Hannah, where are you? The baby is at risk. Come to the clinic immediately. Eleanor. They know I'm here, Hannah whispered. A contraction seized her suddenly, doubling her over. Not Braxton Hicks this time, something stronger, deeper. Hannah. Lucas steadied her, concern etching his features. It's too early, she gasped. The baby's not due for 6 weeks. The entity is accelerating things. Lucas helped her to a chair. We need to get you out of here. How? They're watching every exit, Lucas hesitated. There's another way. The maintenance tunnels connect to the old coal delivery system. They lead beyond the school grounds. His expression darkened. But we'd have to pass near room 107. Another contraction hit, stronger than the first. Hannah bit back a cry, clutching Lucas's arm. When it passed, she noticed the lights flickering rhythmically, pulsing in time with her contractions. It knows, she whispered. It's responding to the baby. Outside, thunder crashed so violently the building seemed to shake. The security monitors flickered, showing teams of researchers rushing toward the east wing. In room 107, strange light emanated from the center of the classroom, visible even through the security camera's grainy feed. It's beginning, Lucas said grimly. We need to move now. They navigated basement corridors, dimly lit by emergency lights, Hannah pausing every few minutes as contractions intensified. The building groaned around them, pipes rattling, concrete dust sifting from the ceiling. Above, footsteps pounded as teams raced to contain whatever was awakening. At the basement's far end, Lucas unlocked a rusted door, revealing a narrow utility tunnel. This runs beneath the east wing, then connects to the coal chute that leads outside the fence line. Hannah hesitated at the threshold. What about Irene? She was helping me. Irene's the one who helped me hide. She's gathering others, former students who understand what's happening. They're waiting beyond the school grounds. As they entered the tunnel, the overhead lights exploded one by one behind them, darkness chasing them forward. The air grew colder, heavy with anticipation and the metallic tang of ozone. Hannah's contractions came faster now, her body preparing for a birth that couldn't possibly be natural. They reached a junction directly beneath room 107. Above them, muffled voices shouted instructions, equipment hummed. And beneath it all, a strange modulating tone like nothing Hannah had ever heard. The baby thrashed violently, responding to the sound. Almost there, Lucas encouraged, supporting more of Hannah's weight as her strength waned. A final turning brought them to the base of the coal chute, a steep concrete slope leading upward to freedom. As Lucas reached for the rusted ladder, a voice called from the darkness behind them. That's far enough. Dr. Richards emerged from the shadows, medical bag in one hand, small pistol in the other. "Hannah, you're in labor. You and your baby need immediate medical attention. You want to use my child?" Hannah spat. "There's some kind of psychic conduit for your weapon." "It's more complicated than that." Eleanor's professional demeanor slipped, revealing genuine concern beneath. "What's awakening up there is beyond anyone's control now. Your baby may be the only one who can survive contact with it." The tunnel shook violently. Dust and concrete chips rained down as something massive shifted in the building above. "It's fully manifesting," Eleanor said urgently. "We need to get you to the containment area." "It's your only chance." Lucas stepped protectively in front of Hannah. "We're leaving." Eleanor raised the pistol. "I can't let you do that." A tremendous crash sounded directly above them as the ceiling began to crack. All three looked up in horror as room 107 began collapsing into the tunnel. Concrete dust choked the air as the ceiling fractured above them. Eleanor lunged forward, grabbing Hannah's arm just as Lucas shoved her toward the coal chute. In the confusion, the gun discharged, the bullet ricocheting off metal pipes as all three scrambled away from the collapsing tunnel section. "Move!" Lucas shouted, half dragging Hannah toward the exit as Eleanor stumbled behind them. They reached the coal chute just as the tunnel behind them completely gave way. Hannah clutched the rusted ladder rungs, another contraction seizing her as she tried to climb. The pain dropped her to her knees. "I can't," she gasped. "The baby, it's coming!" Eleanor pushed past Lucas, medical instincts overriding everything else. "She's in active labor. We need to get her somewhere safe, now." A deep rumbling shook the entire building. Through the disintegrating tunnel ceiling, a strange luminescence poured downward like liquid light, coalescing into tendrils that probed the darkness. "It's searching for her," Eleanor whispered. Fear replacing clinical detachment. Lucas made a swift decision. "The gymnasium? It's the sturdiest part of the building. Multiple exits." "The containment team is there," Eleanor objected. "We don't have a choice." Together they helped Hannah through maintenance corridors as the school continued to fracture around them. Pipes burst, spraying steam and water. Electrical systems failed in cascading blackouts, emergency lights providing only intermittent illumination. They emerged into the gymnasium to find chaos. The research team's carefully arranged equipment lay scattered as if swept aside by an invisible hand. Several technicians were unconscious on the floor, while others frantically tried to restore systems. The distinguished man Hannah had seen earlier barked orders as monitors displayed incomprehensible data streams. "Director Harmon," Eleanor called. "We need medical assistance. The subject is in labor." The man turned, his expression shifting from anger to calculated interest as he saw Hannah. "Get her to the containment pod, now!" "She needs a proper medical facility," Eleanor argued, helping Hannah to a gymnastics mat away from the scattered equipment. "There's no time," Harmon snapped. "The entity is fully manifesting. We're losing the east wing completely." As if confirming his assessment, a tremendous crash echoed through the building. Emergency sirens wailed as structural integrity warnings blared from the team's equipment. Hannah screamed as another contraction hit, this one lasting nearly a minute. Around them, the remaining lights flickered wildly, then stabilized into an unnatural bluish glow. The temperature plummeted, breath fogging in the suddenly frigid air. "It's coming," Lucas whispered. "Not just the baby, it's coming here." Sheriff Parker burst through the gymnasium doors, uniform torn, face bloodied. "East wing is gone," he reported breathlessly. "Complete structural collapse. Whatever was in room 107 is moving through the building." Director Harmon gestured to the containment pod. "Get her inside. It's the only chance any of us have." "No!" Hannah cried as two technicians moved toward her. "You can't have my baby!" The gymnasium doors slammed shut with such force that the reinforced glass shattered. The bluish light intensified, swirling like water around the ceiling fixtures. Equipment sparked and died as overwhelming electrical current surged through the building's wiring. Then silence. A peculiar, heavy silence that seemed to absorb all sound. In the center of the gymnasium, the air rippled like heat waves rising from summer asphalt. The ripples expanded, contracted, then opened like an iris to reveal darkness. Not absence of light, but darkness as a tangible thing. A substance with weight and intention, it poured outward, forming a vaguely humanoid shape that towered nearly to the ceiling. No distinct features marked what might be a face, yet everyone felt its attention shift between them, evaluating. "Considering magnificent," Harmon whispered, stepping forward despite his team's warnings. 15 years of dormancy, and it's evolved beyond our projections." The entity turned toward his voice. A tendril of darkness extended, hovering inches from Harmon's face. "We created you," Harmon said, remarkably steady. "Project Lighthouse. We can help you fully manifest, give you purpose." The tendril retreated slightly, as if considering. Then with shocking speed, it plunged into Harmon's chest. The director convulsed, eyes wide with shock rather than pain. When the darkness withdrew, Harmon collapsed, unconscious but alive. The entity turned toward Hannah, darkness flowing across the floor like oil. Lucas and Eleanor moved protectively before her, but the entity simply stopped, its mass undulating as if breathing, waiting. Another contraction gripped Hannah, this one so powerful she felt something shift inside her. "The baby's coming," she gasped. "Now!" Eleanor looked panicked. "Here?" Parker stepped forward suddenly, dropping his weapon. "Wait!" he called to his team, who were raising experimental-looking devices toward the entity. "Stand down. Don't provoke it." "Sheriff?" one of the technicians questioned. "My father wasn't crazy," Parker said, eyes fixed on the hovering darkness. "He knew what they created here. What they did to the children." He moved closer to Hannah. "Including her. I've been tracking this project for 15 years, working my way into their confidence, waiting for the chance to expose them." The entity seemed to respond to his words, the darkness becoming less dense, more translucent. Through its shifting mass, Hannah glimpsed children, dozens of them, their forms transparent but recognizable. Some she knew from the old-school photographs. All looked toward her with expressions of mingled hope and fear. "The children," she whispered. "They're still here. Their pain, their fear, their abilities, all captured, preserved in this manifestation," Parker confirmed. "My father tried to free them. Now it's our chance!" Hannah screamed as the most powerful contraction yet tore through her. The overhead lights exploded, plunging the gymnasium into darkness, broken only by the entity's blue-black luminescence and the dim glow of emergency exit signs. "The baby's crowning," Eleanor announced. Professional training taking over as she knelt between Hannah's legs. "Push with the next contraction." The entity moved closer, its mass now surrounding them in a protective circle. The temperature rose slightly within its perimeter, as if it were sheltering them from the chaos beyond. Hannah bore down, crying out as her body worked to deliver her child 6 weeks early. Lucas held her hand, murmuring encouragement, while Parker stood guard against the increasingly desperate research team. "One more push," Eleanor urged. With a final, tremendous effort, Hannah delivered her baby into Eleanor's waiting hands. For one heart-stopping moment, no sound came from the tiny form. Then a lusty cry filled the gymnasium, stronger than should be possible from premature lungs. The entity went completely still. Every particle of its darkness focused on the newborn as Eleanor quickly wiped the baby clean and wrapped it in her lab coat. "A girl," she said softly, placing the infant on Hannah's chest. "She's perfect." The baby's cries stopped abruptly as she opened her eyes, revealing irises of such deep blue they appeared almost black in the strange light. She turned her head with impossible coordination, gazing directly at the entity hovering above them. The darkness responded, flowing downward like gentle rain to pool around mother and child, never touching, but close enough that Hannah felt its curious attention. "She recognizes it," Lucas whispered. No, Hannah realized, watching her daughter's unwavering gaze. It recognizes her. The research team regrouped at the gymnasium's perimeter, weapons and equipment trained on the dark entity surrounding Hannah and her newborn daughter. Director Harmon had regained consciousness, fury etching his features as he watched his life's work spiral beyond control. "Containment Protocol Theta," he ordered, voice ragged. "Full spectrum suppression. Stand down," Sheriff Parker countered, badge held high. "This is now a criminal investigation into illegal human experimentation. Everyone here is under arrest," Harmon laughed harshly. "You have no jurisdiction over a national security matter, Sheriff. This entity represents decades of research and incalculable military potential. It represents children you tortured," Parker retorted, "including the woman who just gave birth on your watch." The standoff intensified as more security personnel flooded the gymnasium, taking positions around the perimeter. Hannah clutched her newborn closer, the umbilical cord still connecting them as Eleanor worked efficiently to deliver the afterbirth. "We need to cut the cord," Eleanor murmured. Medical scissors poised. The entity reacted instantly, darkness flowing between Eleanor's hands and the umbilical cord. Not threatening, but clearly prohibiting the separation. "Wait," Lucas said, studying the entity's movement. "I don't think it wants to harm the baby. It's protecting them." Indeed, the darkness had formed a dome-like structure around mother and child, permitting only Lucas and Eleanor inside its perimeter. Beyond, the research team's equipment sparked and malfunctioned when aimed toward them. Hannah felt oddly calm within the entity's embrace, her newborn daughter alert and quiet against her chest. The baby's eyes remained fixed on the shifting darkness, tiny hands reaching upward as if recognizing something familiar. "She's not afraid," Hannah whispered. "Why would she be?" came Irene Miller's voice as the elderly woman somehow slipped through the security perimeter to kneel beside Hannah. "She's known it her entire existence." The gymnasium doors burst open again. To everyone's astonishment, townspeople began filing in. Dozens of Millbrook residents, many Hannah recognized from her brief time in town. Among them walked adults who matched the children in the old school photographs. Former Westridge students now grown. "We felt it awakening," explained a middle-aged man who stepped forward. "Some of us have been waiting 15 years for this moment." Alan Bernstein, Lucas identified him. "He was the strongest telepath in the program." Bernstein nodded to Lucas, then addressed the research team. "Your equipment won't work. Your weapons are useless. What was created here can't be contained by your technology." Director Harmon stepped forward. "These people are civilians trespassing on a classified operation. Remove them immediately." "No," Bernstein replied simply. The group of former students formed a circle around the entity's perimeter, joining hands. "We're the ones who created it. We're the only ones who truly understand what it is." As they joined hands, the entity's darkness rippled with blue-white energy. The temperature in the gymnasium dropped sharply, then stabilized as the darkness expanded to encompass the former students in its protective embrace. "What are they doing?" Hannah asked Lucas, connecting with it, reclaiming it. He watched in awe as the entity's amorphous shape began resolving into clearer definition, still darkness, but with purpose and intention radiating from every undulation. They're the source of its consciousness. Their pain, their fear, their gifts, all absorbed into this manifestation. The baby cooed, a surprisingly strong sound that drew the entity's attention. The darkness flowed closer, hovering above the infant. To everyone's amazement, the newborn's skin began to emit a soft blue luminescence, not reflected light, but generated from within. "She's responding to it," Eleanor whispered. "Scientific curiosity temporarily overriding fear." "Not responding," Hannah corrected. "Understanding flowing through her with sudden clarity. Communicating." The entity expanded suddenly, darkness flowing outward to engulf the entire gymnasium. But rather than menace, it brought revelations. Images projected into the minds of everyone present. Children in room 107 subjected to increasingly distressing tests, their collective fear and pain coalescing into a protective force. The entity's 15-year hibernation, gathering strength, waiting for someone who could truly connect with it without exploitation. As the visions faded, the entity contracted, concentrating its mass into a more defined shape, still vaguely humanoid, but with unmistakable purpose. It extended tendrils toward the research team's equipment, particularly the devices intended for containment and control. One by one, these shorted out, components fusing into useless slag. Director Harmon lunged forward in desperation, reaching for a final fail-safe device. "This ends now!" The entity reacted with blinding speed, darkness enveloping Harmon completely. Unlike its earlier exploratory touch, this was decisive. When the darkness retreated, Harmon lay unconscious, the fail-safe device destroyed. One by one, the security team lowered their weapons, backing away from the irrefutable display of power. The entity allowed them to retreat, its attention returning to Hannah and her child. The former students maintained their circle, their expressions shifting from tension to wonder. "It's changing," Bernstein announced. "The negative energy, the pain and fear that shaped it, it's being transformed. Indeed, the darkness was gradually infused with light, blue-white luminescence threading through its mass like stars appearing in night sky. The same glow emanated from Hannah's daughter, her tiny body radiating connection to the transformed entity. She's purifying it, Irene realized. The child born without trauma, without fear, she's giving it what we couldn't, a connection untainted by pain. The entity lowered itself until it hovered directly above the newborn. Light and darkness intermingled, communicating in a language no one else could comprehend. Then, with surprising gentleness, it touched the umbilical cord still connecting mother and child. The cord separated painlessly, sealing itself without Eleanor's intervention. As it did, the entity expanded outward once more, not in aggression but in liberation. It flowed through the gymnasium walls, spreading throughout the damaged school building. From outside came the sound of groaning metal and shifting stone. The entire structure of Westridge Elementary began to change. 6 months later, Hannah stood beneath the newly installed sign at Westridge's entrance, Lighthouse Haven, School for Exceptional Children. Fresh paint gleamed on restored walls, and through open windows came the sounds of children's voices, not fearful, but filled with concentration and occasional wonder. "Hard to believe it's the same place," Eleanor said, joining Hannah on the front steps. Their relationship had transformed in the aftermath. Initial betrayal giving way to cautious alliance as Eleanor abandoned decades of secrecy to help establish the new school. "It never was just a building," Hannah replied, shifting her daughter in her arms. Little Lily, now 6 months old, gazed at the school with unusual focus for an infant, her eyes still that remarkable deep blue. Inside, the transformation was even more dramatic. Where decay had reigned, now bright classrooms housed children with gifts similar to those Westridge had once exploited. But unlike the original Project Lighthouse, this program operated with transparency, ethical oversight, and most importantly, the full participation of the community that had once shunned the building. In the former gymnasium, Lucas led a session teaching younger children to recognize and control their emerging abilities. Many were descendants of original project subjects, talents resurfacing generations later. The manifestation doesn't frighten them. Lucas explained when Hannah entered with Lily. The children waved before returning to their exercise, attempting to influence the movement of feathers floating in glass jars. They understand it's protective, not threatening. The entity remained throughout the building, its presence evident in subtle ways, lights that responded to emotional states, doors that opened for those in need, temperature adjustments that anticipated comfort. No longer darkness. It existed as a benevolent intelligence interwoven with the school's physical structure. Sheriff Parker, who had risked his career to expose the original project's abuses, now served as Lighthouse Haven's head of security. His office displayed his father's exonerated name alongside documents, revealing the truth about Westridge's past. Federal investigators are still processing the evidence, he told Hannah during her daily walkthrough. Harmon and his team face serious charges. The original Project Lighthouse files have been declassified. And the children who were part of it? Hannah asked, though she knew the answer, finding peace finally. Many have joined our advisory board. Parker smiled at Lily, who reached for him with chubby hands. She's growing strong. Indeed, Lily thrived in ways that both delighted and occasionally startled Hannah. Her developmental milestones accelerated beyond any normal timeline. More remarkably, her connection to the entity remained unbroken, a symbiotic relationship that manifested in small but unmistakable phenomena. Toys that moved to entertain her when she was fussy, lights that danced across her ceiling as she fell asleep. The subtle blue glow that sometimes emanated from her skin when she dreamed in what had once been Room 107, now rebuilt as a meditation space. Hannah found Irene Miller guiding former students through healing exercises. The room's malevolent history had been cleansed, its amplifying properties now harnessed for recovery rather than exploitation. The children created it from their fear, Irene had explained when they first reopened the room. Now they're reclaiming it through understanding, transforming trauma into growth. In her private apartment, converted from the school's west wing, Hannah placed Lily in her crib for an afternoon nap. The mobile above spun gently without wind, the entity's subtle presence comforting rather than frightening. Hannah touched the restored lighthouse symbol painted on the nursery wall. No longer a government project's code name, but reclaimed as a beacon of safety. Her own gifts, dormant until pregnancy had activated them, now allowed her to sense the entity's presence throughout the building. Not as separate consciousness, but as guardian protector, the externalized collective power of special children who had finally found acceptance. Outside her window, the front lawn hosted a gathering of townspeople and former students. The community that had once shunned Westridge now helped maintain it, finding healing in honest confrontation of the past. Monthly open houses welcomed anyone seeking understanding, each visit diminishing the fear that had allowed the original abuses to continue. Hannah thought of the auction where she'd purchased the abandoned school, desperate, alone, seeking merely shelter. Instead, she'd found purpose, community, and a heritage she'd never known was hers. The entity that might have been weaponized had instead become sanctuary. As she watched her daughter sleep, tiny fingers glowing softly blue in dreams, Hannah felt the entity's attention, not the fearful presence from children's drawings, but a benevolent guardian born of pain but transformed by acceptance. "Sleep well," Hannah whispered, knowing the entity would watch over her child, just as it watched over all the exceptional children now finding haven within Westridge's walls. "We're home." In the hallway outside, a classroom door opened and closed gently, as if in agreement.